Our next speaker is Stephen Meredith, and Stephen did not come from out of town. He actually is a postdoctoral fellow at the Behavioral Pharmacology Research Unit where I work at Hopkins. And he's here representing his graduate school mentor, in a way, whose name is Jesse Dallery down at the University of Florida. And Lisa Marsh also mentioned Jesse because he's been working with this technology development group. Steve is going to be talking about some new methods for delivering smoking cessation, and I think this is a really important topic for you all as clinical service providers. You know smoking is really bad, you know all your clients smoke, and this is something that tends to get ignored in our treatment programs, but to our detriment is it ignored. So I wanted to make sure to include it in the program today. Steve, please, I'll turn the podium over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Maxine. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. This is a really great theme, and it's great to just sit in the audience and learn about all the cutting-edge technology that's being used to enhance behavioral health. So I'll be focusing on web-based, computer-based, phone-based technology to promote smoking cessation. And for most of the presentation, I'm going to talk about research that I conducted for my dissertation while I was at the University of Florida with my graduate advisor, Jesse Dallery. Okay. Okay. So yeah, this is work that I did at the University of Florida with my graduate advisor, Jesse Dallery. Like Maxine said, I'm now here at Hopkins in the Behavioral Pharmacology Research Unit. I'm doing caffeine research, but also still working with contingency management and promoting smoking cessation. And of course, you know, it takes a village to do any kind of research, so I'd also like to just thank right off the bat, especially Michael Grabinski and Prabal Dutta, all these other researchers and these organizations that helped pay the bills. Couldn't do anything without them. So I'm here talking about cigarette smoking because it's obviously a really serious public health concern. 1 in 5 Americans currently smoke, and smoking prevalence is much higher among, this just is not working. Thanks to the tech support. So yeah, smoking is a problem, but it's an even bigger problem among adults with addictive disorders. Up to 94% of some of these individuals are smokers. So this makes the futures of these patients really bleak, considering that smoking is still the leading cause of preventable morbidity and mortality in the United States. In fact, the life expectancy of current smokers is 10 years shorter than never smokers. However, quitting by the age of 40 does reduce the risk of smoking-related death by up to 40%. So this is the good news, especially considering that about 70% of smokers report a desire to quit smoking. Unfortunately, only about 30% actually attempt to quit each year, and about 75% of these quickly relapse. So what can we do to help? Well, there are a lot of brief interventions out there that can be used to help promote smoking cessation. But there's definitely need for more intensive treatment. And contingency management is one intensive, very promising strategy that can be used to promote smoking cessation. And if anyone here is unfamiliar with it, essentially it's just a behavioral intervention in which financial incentives are contingent on objective evidence of drug abstinence. And it's been used to promote abstinence from a variety of abused substances, and we now have over 30 years of published reports and some independent reviews of the literature that suggest that it's one of the most efficacious treatments out there for drug dependence. And there have even been some studies to show that incentives contingent on reductions in breath carbon monoxide indicative of abstinence can be used to promote smoking cessation. And in fact, it was Maxine Sitzer and her colleagues at the Behavioral Pharmacology Research Unit that were really the pioneers of this treatment approach. And since then, a number of studies have been conducted over the years incentivizing reductions in breath CO. Unfortunately, CM interventions are used by community-based treatment providers only about 11 to 25% of the time. And as far as I know, that's more like 0% of the time in the case of cigarette smoking. So if we're going to develop an intervention and apply CM to the treatment of cigarette smoking, then we have to try to develop an intervention that will actually be adopted by practitioners. But this can be challenging given several limitations that are associated with CM. For example, response effort. So due to the short half-life of breath CO, in order to accurately assess smoking status, practitioners have to frequently monitor breath breath CO. But barriers such as distance to a clinic, lack of transportation, disability, these things can all interfere with frequent monitoring. So to overcome these barriers, Jesse Dallery and colleagues developed a web-based contingency management program in which incentives were contingent on video samples of breath CO measures indicative of abstinence. This is a study I actually worked on as an undergraduate research assistant in Jesse's lab, and participants just used a web camera and a carbon monoxide monitor, blew into the carbon monoxide monitor with the web camera and emailed the videos to researchers. We just reviewed them before awarding the incentives. And 97% of the samples that were scheduled for collection during this particular study were actually collected by researchers. So there was a lot of engagement with the treatment, and 65% of the samples that were submitted during the treatment phase of the intervention were negative or indicative of abstinence. So it works well as well. And right now, Jesse's conducting a nationwide clinical trial, so each one of these blue dots represents a participant here, and now I think they have over 60 participants in this study, and again, you're seeing similar results here, so the equipment's just being FedExed to participants around the country, and everything's being done remotely. So this web-based intervention at least addressed one limitation of traditional contingency management, that the response effort that's required. But another potential limitation is compatibility with standard care. So the vast majority of studies evaluate CM when it's delivered to individuals. But group therapy is the most common treatment approach in a lot of substance use disorder clinics. So could we increase dissemination potential by increasing compatibility with group therapy? And some researchers have attempted to do this by providing incentives contingent on group therapy attendance. But another really promising strategy is to integrate group contingencies into the incentive schedules that are being used to promote abstinence. In other words, not only award incentives contingent on individual abstinence, but award them contingent on group abstinence. And there have been a lot of different types of group contingency arrangements described in the literature. So I'm just going to describe them today as those in which the behavior of one or more group members determines the consequences received by at least one other group member. And they've been used to modify a variety of behavior. And they're typically used in classroom settings because they're just easier to implement in these types of environments than individual contingencies. But we haven't seen this treatment approach applied to cigarette smoking. And one potential advantage of using these types of contingencies to treat cigarette smoking is that they might promote abstinence contingent praise or social support among smokers. And there is some evidence to suggest that social support might promote smoking cessation. However, there haven't really been very many prospective empirical studies on this topic. So as we did with response effort, we wanted to find out if we could turn another limitation of traditional CM into kind of an advantage of web-based CM by integrating monetary group contingencies and an online peer support forum into our existing web-based platform. And that's what we did in this initial study. So this was just kind of a feasibility study to see if this type of treatment approach would really work. So we recruited a small number of participants and used a within-subject design. These were all participants who wanted to quit smoking. We divided them up into small teams as well, 2 to 3 participants per team. And we loaned each one of them a web camera and a carbon monoxide monitor. One of the monitors is pictured here. And the CO monitoring procedure involved twice daily video sample submissions, just as we had done in the past, and the samples had to be submitted a minimum of 8 hours apart to really capture smoking status throughout the day. And breath CO samples less than or equal to 4 parts per million were considered negative. And this Motivate system software was the software that Michael Grabinski developed that we've been using, and it allowed us to collect these videos and to deliver treatment. So I'm going to show you what all that looks like now. When participants wanted to access the Motivate website, they'd log in using their usernames and passwords, and this would just direct them to a personalized homepage. And on this page, they could track their progress throughout the study. So each one of these blue data points represents an individual CO level that was submitted at some point during the study. And they could even click on this link here to see their teammates' quantitative progress graph. That would just open up another window here. And they could see when their teammates were meeting their goals or when they were lapsing. And this is really the most important feature of a group contingency-based intervention. So you have to know when your teammates or when the other group members are meeting their treatment goals in order to provide the appropriate social consequences for that behavior. And when they wanted to provide these consequences, they'd click on this link here, and that would direct them to a relatively standard online discussion forum. So this wasn't equipped with real-time communication, but they could access it anytime, day or night, to post a message or read a message that was posted by their teammates. And they could click on this link to go back to their home page, and then click on this post video button when they wanted to submit a video. And the website would just kind of direct them through the video submission process with step-by-step on-screen instructions. They'd enter their CO measure, and the system would notify them when they earned an incentive or when they met their treatment goal. So incentive delivery was automated, and then researchers would later review the videos to make sure that there was some treatment integrity there. And they could also just keep track of how many incentives they earned over the course of the study by checking out their account activity. And what did we find? Well, again, we used within subject multiple baseline experimental design. So I'm not going to really go into that other than to say that baseline duration varied across teams between 2 and 6 days. And during this condition, no incentives were available, and only one participant submitted one negative sample. And then during a treatment period, participants could earn incentives on a mixed contingency arrangement. So concurrently arranged independent and interdependent contingencies of reinforcement. In other words, each participant could earn an incentive every time they submitted a negative sample, and then they could earn additional incentives every time every member of their team submitted a negative sample. And you can see that the percentage of negative samples increased considerably during this phase. And the costs of the incentives weren't terribly expensive either, so on average about $60 per person over the course of the intervention. So we also found that participants use the discussion forum. They use it regularly, and you can see by some really representative examples here that the posts were really quite positive. And each one of these is taken from a different participant from a different team. And you can see you've got some encouragement, some trying to use the money to motivate teammates, and an example of some abstinence contingent praise here at the bottom. So people were really engaged with the discussion forum. So this initial study showed that group CM is at least feasible. We were able to integrate these social contingencies and these monetary group contingencies into the existing web-based platform. But I really wanted to conduct kind of a component analysis. So in a subsequent study, we basically tried to dissociate the effects of the independent and interdependent group contingencies and the social contingencies on smoking cessation. So we recruited more smokers who wanted to quit smoking and divided them into small teams. And we collected breath seal measures from each participant prior to the onset of the intervention when we set them up. And at this time point, only one participant submitted one negative sample. And then the teams of participants were exposed to 3 5-day experimental conditions. And the order of these conditions was counterbalanced across teams. So each individual experienced each one of these conditions, but they didn't necessarily experience them in this sequence. During an independent contingency condition, incentives were contingent on individual performance. So each time participants submitted a negative sample, they earned an incentive independent of how their teammates performed. And then during an interdependent contingency condition, the same magnitude incentives were available, but they were available on this strict interdependent group contingency arrangement. So all 3 teammates had to submit a negative sample in order for any one of them to receive an incentive. And you can see treatment outcomes were pretty similar. So this is the first study, to our knowledge, that showed that these types of group contingencies could be used to promote any sort of abstinence. And what was interesting was, despite the similar treatment outcomes, the cost was much different. So the average cost of incentives per participant during that 5-day independent contingency condition was 4 times as much as it was for the interdependent contingency condition. So this suggests that group contingencies have the potential to maybe lower some treatment costs, but not necessarily sacrifice treatment efficacy. And interestingly, we also found a significant increase in negative breath CO samples during this no incentive condition relative to prior to the intervention. And this wasn't a complete surprise because these were smokers who were motivated to quit smoking. They reported a desire to quit smoking. Importantly, though, participants who were abstinent during this condition, they experienced this condition following one of the two incentive conditions. So no participant who was exposed to this no incentive condition first in the sequence of experimental conditions was abstinent during that condition. So it suggests that these other treatment features, the self-report or the self-monitoring, the feedback, the goal setting, all these other features contributed to helping promote abstinence, but they weren't enough to initiate abstinence, only sustain it after it was initiated in an incentive condition first. And then we also exposed half of the participants to this online discussion forum that I showed you earlier, so they could communicate with their teammates throughout the study. And this didn't appear to increase abstinence, but it did improve treatment acceptability, some of the measures that we collected. So this interdependent group contingency condition was more acceptable to participants when they were able to communicate with their teammates. If they couldn't communicate with their teammates, they really didn't like that condition very much. And this was also the first study to provide any objective evidence that group contingencies actually do promote social support. So that's always kind of been an assumption. But the participants who had access to the discussion forum used it more during that interdependent group contingency condition than during the other conditions. But overall, participants didn't really like that interdependent group contingency condition, and we didn't expect that they would. We chose this really strict contingency arrangement for experimental purposes, but you can imagine how frustrating it might be if you're succeeding in your quit attempt, but you're not earning any incentives because your teammates aren't succeeding. So I think this might work for a minority of smokers, and a couple smokers did like this condition, but it's likely that a mixed contingency arrangement similar to what we used in the first study is more practical. So in other words, a contingency arrangement that provides some rewards based on individual performance and additional rewards based on group performance. And this type of schedule would likely increase the acceptability of the intervention, but it would still help reduce incentive costs and provide sort of the social benefits that you would want to get from group contingency management intervention. So our research suggests that not only does web-based contingency management reduce response effort, but web-based group contingency management might help reduce incentive costs, and it might also help improve compatibility with standard care, as we saw that the group contingencies did increase social support that might benefit some smokers. And I think a really promising feature of this intervention is that it might be used to promote long-term maintenance of treatment gains, which is really the Achilles heel of contingency management and all substance abuse interventions. So trying to get those long-term treatment outcomes. And we saw, again, that during that non-incentive condition, the goal setting, the self-monitoring, the feedback, none of that really initiated abstinence, but it sustained brief abstinence for some smokers. And maybe by keeping those treatment components in place and keeping the social contingencies in place, then we could increase treatment duration without necessarily increasing treatment costs. So we know there's a lot of promise with this intervention and with computer-based interventions in general. And this is really exciting because computer-based treatment can be disseminated to millions, hundreds of millions of people. But billions of people have cell phones. And not only do more people have mobile phones, but people who live in rural communities, people who can't afford computers. In other words, people who are likely in need of evidence-based smoking cessation interventions the most, these kinds of people own mobile phones. So if we could harness the power of this web-based, computer-based contingency management with cell phone technology, then we could potentially reach many more smokers in need of treatment. And this would also allow us to more easily integrate the social features of the intervention with social media, pre-existing social networks, texting and chatting, all this stuff to further enhance the value of social support. And ultimately, that's what we hope to do with a mobile phone-based breath-CO-meter that we're developing with financial support from the Center for Technology and Behavioral Health. So far, we've developed 2 prototypes that are undergoing accuracy and acceptability testing, and preliminary results show that participants are very enthusiastic about the device. And even outside the context of a contingency management intervention, I think this has a lot of promise as just a standalone treatment tool. Like, all these other features of the intervention, the feedback and everything, helped promote abstinence. And it was actually, that's something that I didn't discuss, was all of the acceptability measures that we collected the favorite feature of the intervention was that quantitative progress graph on people's home pages. So they really like being able to track their progress during a quit attempt, and this would provide them an opportunity to do that immediately and frequently. Unfortunately, you can't use this mobile meter, and Motivate isn't commercially available either. But CM interventions have been conducted without these technologies. There's a lot of options available. At the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned that before we had Motivate, we used to email videos or participants emailed videos to us so that we could do this contingency management intervention. And recently, Alessi and Petrie gave alcohol users mobile phones and breathalyzers, and participants submitted video recordings of breath alcohol tests, and the results showed that this mobile phone-based CM intervention was able to promote abstinence from alcohol. And this was all done with commercially available technology. And if you do rely on video recordings, you do have to take some precautions. You do have to make sure that the date and time stamps of the videos are accurate. But these are things that you don't have to worry about with a communication method like Skype. And I'm sure this is being used, but I haven't noticed a lot of substance abuse researchers talking about Skype. And I think it has great potential as a treatment tool because it's also available on smartphones, and it allows that real-time communication. But regardless of the communication method that you use, if you're going to conduct a contingency management intervention, one treatment component that's really critical is to include some sort of objective measure of cigarette smoking, because smokers often misclassify themselves as non-smokers. And this is the device that we used, the Pico Plus Smokerlyzer, which was manufactured by a company called Bedfont, and it's distributed in the US by a company called Covita, and Covita representatives are actually here at the symposium today, so I recommend checking it out and learning more about how much these things cost and just more information about them. And if cost is an issue, as it is now probably more than ever, then there are methods available to help reduce or offset at least incentive costs. And I wanted to provide all of the information for this article here because it's essentially a how-to guide on soliciting community donations. And these researchers were able to secure over $160,000 from the Los Angeles community over a 34-month period to finance incentives for substance abuse treatment. In addition, just creative schedule arrangement can help lower costs. So like the group contingencies that I discussed, probabilistic or lottery-based schedules like the fishbowl method that some of you are probably familiar with. And these two websites provide a lot of useful information, not about just how to arrange probabilistic schedules of reinforcement, but just about some general principles to use when implementing a contingency management program. And simply announcing a behavior change goal to a social network can also help promote abstinence, or it can help promote target behavior. It hasn't really been shown to promote abstinence yet. And there's evidence that deposit contracts can promote smoking cessation. So smokers can basically put their own money on the line and earn it back contingent on abstinence. And stick.com is a commercially available website that utilizes both of these techniques. So anyone can use this site for virtually any behavior change goal. The first step basically to commit to your quit attempt. And the second step is to make a deposit in an amount of your choosing. You get the money back if you succeed. And if you don't succeed, the money is awarded to whomever you choose. So it can be a friend or a charity, or it can even be like an anti-charity. So some charity whose mission that you strongly oppose. And then the next step is to assign someone as your referee to monitor your progress and to confirm your success or your lack of success. And maybe this could be a clinician. And you could also add a social network that can help provide additional incentives during the quit attempt. So this is a really cool website worth checking out. And if incentives in any shape or any form just aren't an option, most of these other treatment strategies are also available through the web. And there's growing evidence that web-based interventions that rely on these types of strategies can help promote smoking cessation. So the National Cancer Institute's website, smokefree.gov, is they've got a lot of great resources, so I would recommend going through this website. And becomeanx.org is, I think, a particularly interesting site because it includes a number of really interactive features that allows smokers to kind of develop a personalized, tailored quit plan. And this personalized, interactive type of design is also common among a lot of phone-based applications, which I think makes the mobile phone app a particularly promising modality for delivering smoking cessation treatment. But although there are dozens of quit smoking apps available on the market, very few of them are actually evidence-based. However, the National Cancer Institute's NCI QuitPal developed, it's one of the iPhone apps that relies on a number of evidence-based strategies. So I would recommend checking this one out. It's free on iTunes, and I just contacted them recently. It sounds like they're developing an Android version as well. And this allows smokers to set a quit date and set reminders, use a calendar to track their daily smoking. They can see how much money they saved or how many packs of cigarettes they haven't smoked. And they can even chat live with a National Cancer Institute representative. And I just wanted to remind everyone of the slightly lower tech, but also effective quit lines in the United States. So every state in the country now has a quit line, and 1-800-QUIT now is the nationwide number to access them from anywhere in the country. These are low-cost programs. They reach millions of smokers, and the strategies that they use are evidence-based. So we know that counseling works. We know that medication works. We know that counseling plus medication works even better. And proactive callbacks can also significantly improve a smoker's chances of quitting. So although the evidence that these types of applications can promote abstinence is growing, the designs of many commercially available interventions aren't always informed by research. So for example, in 2009, more than half of the smoking cessation apps that were downloaded from the iTunes store were hypnosis apps. But regardless of the treatment strategy that's being used in one of these apps, as has been suggested already, these aren't substitutes for trained substance abuse practitioners. They're just tools to help clinicians assist smokers in their quit attempts. So I think practitioners should kind of go through these applications with the patients and follow up with them to ensure that they're using them correctly and that they're engaged with them regularly, because research does show that the more engaged smokers are with these types of technology-based interventions, the more likely they're going to succeed in their quit attempts. So to sum up, there's a lot of really innovative technology that researchers are working on that will someday help a lot of smokers quit smoking. But there are a lot of ICT options that are available right now that we can use to promote smoking cessation. So take advantage of them to implement your own CM intervention, use technology to objectively assess smoking status, adopt some strategies to help reduce incentive costs, and take advantage of these other types of applications that can either supplement or substitute a CM intervention. But whatever you do, you want to make sure that you choose an option that's evidence-based, and that you want to make sure that the patients are actually engaged with the intervention and using it correctly. Okay, I rushed through that fast enough.
One quick question. Were any of the participants in your study, did they use Patch or Chantix or any other?
That's not something that we controlled for, but no. There was maybe one or two people in a study here or there. I remember one in particular that tried it and didn't like the patch, but it's not something we controlled for, but it didn't happen.
But that's a good question about the medications. One point is that any of these technology-based interventions, behavioral support interventions, are totally compatible with any medication that a smoker would want to use, and also that the most highly recommended evidence-based practice is to combine medications with. So how many people are inspired to go help their clients quit smoking with all this wonderful technology already available, plus, as Jesse showed you, and thank you for providing those really concrete examples of what a web-based intervention looks like for smoking cessation. Fantastic. Thank you.